Good morning, mathematicians. Okay, let's go ahead and work on lesson 2 for our scatter plots. Today we are going to construct scatter plots. Construct means to make. We are going to make scatter plots. Now, in order to make a scatter plot, we do have an x and y axis, a coordinate plane. I notice that on my graph I have the distance from the hoop at the bottom, and I have baskets made at the top. So I already know, sounds like something with basketball. So let's go ahead and read the word problem. Jared's basketball team stood at various distances from the basketball hoop and counted the number of baskets they were able to make in 30 seconds. Use the data in the table to make a scatter plot. Then answer the questions that follow. Okay, so I noticed that they measured from various distances from the basketball hoop. Okay, so that's distances from the hoop. And then they gave them 30 seconds to see how many baskets they could make. They were able to make. So here are the baskets made. So here is our data. And remember, each one of our basketball players is going to be a point on our graph. So take a minute if you need to pause the video and remember that this is going to be 15, 2. Go ahead and plot all of the points. Then turn the video back on. Okay, here are the points. And at this point, we're going to start looking at what is going on here. And just to make sure that you understand, I want to know that, let's pick this. Oh, look at that point. Do you notice what's going on here? I kind of notice that I can draw a straight line, but this little guy out here is kind of just hanging out by himself. I'm going to write this one out here. This one is 15, 2. So that means that 15 feet from the basket, this person was able to make 2 shots. Okay, so now that we kind of understand what's going on here, let's look at number 1. Describe the type of association in the scatter plot. So if you need to look back at your notes, you can do that. But remember, what we do is we start at the y-axis, and then we find where our points are, and we look for the general direction. And notice that my points over time are going down. So that means that as my distance from the hoop goes up, so as my x values get larger, my y values are actually getting smaller. So we call this a negative association. As one value goes up, the other value goes down. Okay, number 2. Are there any points that don't fit the overall trend of the data? If so, explain. Okay, that's kind of what we talked about right here. Notice that most of the points are really close to the line that I sketched in. But we've got one over here that is different. It is kind of far away from that line. We actually call that the outlier. What's going on with this outlier? And so, explain what's going on. So even though the player was only 15 feet away, he made, I'm assuming it's a he, maybe it's a she, made only 2 baskets. Only 2 shots. Okay, so I'm kind of explaining what's going on with that point. And it doesn't quite fit our data because for most people that were somewhere between 10 and 15, they made somewhere between 8 and 10 shots. So that is unusual. Okay, second of all, describe any unique observations about the shape of the graph. Well, I do notice that it is going downward. But I also notice that I have some groups. Look at, there's a group up here, and there is a group down here. We actually have a name for that too. So let's go ahead and describe that we see 2 groups. They follow the trend. We see, 2. groups that follow the trend. Okay, so now that we kind of understand our data, let's go ahead and answer some questions. Use the scatter plot to label each statement as true or false. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to sketch some arrows, because arrows always help me when I'm working on scatter plots, and then I'll let you decide if it's true or false. As the distance from the hoop increases, I'm always going to draw an arrow, the number of baskets made decreases. Is that true? As the distance increases, the number of baskets decreases. I use my arrows to help me realize that this is a negative relationship. So what do you think? True or false? It is true. Okay, second one. As the distance from the hoop decreases, the number of baskets made increases. I notice that my arrows are still opposite. So we're kind of saying this backwards. Now, as my distance from the hoop gets smaller, what do we notice is happening to the Y? The baskets made is getting larger. So is this a true statement? Yes, it is true. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about those strange things we saw on our graph. Okay, our first one are outliers. Outliers are points that do not fit the overall trend. So even though our line is a negative association, it is going downward, this one is hanging out all by itself. It is known as an outlier. Which player represents the outlier in the scatter plot above? Well, we kind of already talked about that. So player 15,2. So who is 15,2? Oh, Jared. Oh, it is a boy. Okay, so Jared is the one. Okay, we also have what we call clustering. Clustering is when there is a distinct or separate group of points. Why do you think clustering occurred in the scatter plot below? Now, since we weren't there, we can't actually have a right answer and a wrong answer. Notice it says, what do you think? So go ahead and write down, why do you think there are clusters here? So in other words, what happened here? Why did nobody between 20 and 30 make a basket? Once you write it down, go ahead and go on to the back side. Okay, at this point, you are going to continue working on your own. You should be able to finish up 5 and 6, and make sure you check with your LF, or you can check the answer key to make sure you're doing this correctly.